Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As most of you know, this is a UCCE Master Gardener of Riverside County and Western Municipal Water District. We now go by a shortened name that will make it very easy for you to remember, Western Water. So welcome this morning. And I'd like to let you know that Rosa Olays from Master Gardener is here with us today as a host. And she'll be telling you a little bit about what Master Gardeners are doing out in the town this weekend and in the future. And I'd also like to let you know that I've been having so much fun with these workshops since about 2016, and I will be stepping into a new role. So we'll be introducing a new liaison from Western to work with you on monthly Saturday workshops in the future. His name is Jeffrey Diaz, and you're going to enjoy them so much. So welcome this morning. And I'd also like to shout out a hello to Director Roden. Thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you learn a lot about Native Californians today. So we have a few more people joining us. Welcome aboard, everyone. And I'll hand this over to, actually, I want to let you know that today's topic, as I mentioned, are California natives in your landscape. So we're going to learn to plant them, water them, help them thrive. And Rosa, do you have a few things about Master Gardener activities to share with us this morning?
Yes, I do want to mention a few things. Our Master Gardeners hold events throughout Riverside County. Master Gardeners are trained volunteers that offer science-based information and advice and educate the gardening public. We are at a number of different farmers markets throughout Riverside County, and including Riverside, Temecula, and out in the desert and Palm Springs and La Quinta. Some of these will be opening up as it cools down. I would like to mention also that there are a couple things next weekend on October 21st. We have the Coachella Valley Garden Day at UCR Palm Desert campus. This event is a fun and interactive day of learning things from gardening, landscaping, and from horticulture experts. On that same day, we will have a plant sale, our fall plant sale at the Grow Lab in Riverside. If you want more information on these events or any other events, you can look us up on Facebook. You can also go to our e-blast, which is on our website under newsletter. You can sign up for our monthly e-blast to receive information on the events for that particular month. Again, you can look at our website, go to Facebook. Those events are listed there. Thank you.
Okay, with regards to questions you may have for George as we go through his presentation, he actually has 3 separate presentations for us today. And so we are going to let George decide whether or not he'd like to take questions right after the first one, second one, or third one, or maybe hold it until the end of the program. However, please don't hesitate to put your questions into the chat, and we will address them as we can. Rosa, would you like to introduce George?
Absolutely. So for the past 15 years, George's primary area of gardening interest has been California native plants, which now comprises approximately 70% of his own landscape. Landscape Integrity Films and Education, Life, produced a series of 23 short videos featuring native plants in George and his wife Elaine's yard. There is a link on WMWD website that you can access these videos. In addition to providing information on native plants, George has given presentations on pollinator gardening and maximizing enjoyment in your garden. George has been a docent at the UCR Botanic Garden since 2014, providing tours to youth and adult groups. He also hosted a short videos on California native plants at the Botanic Gardens. In 2020, George became a UCCE Master Gardener to expand his knowledge of sustainable gardening practices and provide information to the public. In 2022, he joined the board of the Rivers and Lands Conservancy to support the conservation of our natural landscapes and habitats. So here is George, who is excited about sharing his information with you.
Hi, thank you, Rosa. And thanks everyone for joining on such a busy day. Oops, yeah, there we go. Okay. Excellent. All right. So just a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. We'll first go over just some general information about the state, its plants, and then some basic information on planting landscapes and planting and maintenance of California natives. Then I can take a few questions after that time. Then I want to go over just a few of the plants, trees, shrubs, some perennials and vines, and annuals and bulbs, just to provide a sampling of some of the plants that are available out there that are commonly used in landscapes. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first, just talking about our state, California. It really is unique in many ways, and the diversity physically is truly amazing. I mean, just talking about the latitude from north to south, we span, I think it's nearly 700 miles. Elevation differences all the way from sea level up to the Sierras, over, actually, I should say from below sea level to 14,000 feet plus. Everything from the beach through inland valleys, mountains, and deserts. We really have it all compared to really most of the rest of the country. Along with that, both the changes in latitude and the different elevations, there's so many different plant communities that we have. We're not in Kansas here. And those are listed. I'm going to talk about them all, but the plants that we use primarily in native landscaping, there's certainly plants available from each of these plant communities, but we'll concentrate primarily on plants from coastal sage scrub, chaparral, and desert plant communities. Let's talk a little about our climate here too, because that has a lot to do with it. We have most of the state, at least west of the mountains, we have this Mediterranean climate, and we take it for granted. I know I certainly did, that we have this beautiful Mediterranean climate where we have cool, wet winters, and then these warm, well, hot, dry summers. And that is not, there's just a handful of places on the planet that have that Mediterranean type climate, and we're fortunate enough to be one of them. And that Mediterranean climate and our temperate weather in general allows us to have this enormous array of species. I think we have about 6,000 different California native species, and about a third of those, about 2,000 of those species are endemic, meaning they only exist in California. So what do we consider a California native? There's certainly different people have different perspectives. A very literal interpretation are plants that just grow within the political boundaries of the state. And I think until recently, the Calscape website, which I hope to talk about later, that's kind of how they operate. It was just, if it grows within the boundaries of the state, is a California native. If it doesn't, it's not. You can also look at it as more of a climate-based definition, that Mediterranean climate, which is defined by the California floristic province, shown on that little diagram there. And that extends up to into Southwest Oregon and down into Baja California. But it does exclude the most of our deserts and the northeastern corner of the state, which is kind of a little corner of the Great Basin area. For our purposes, certainly for my purposes, I consider all these areas, the desert, the Great Basin, and the entire California floristic province as a host to what I will call California native plants. So why plant California natives? There's certainly a lot of reasons to do so. You may have your own reasons. They may correspond with some of these, maybe not, but certainly drought tolerance, water conservation, and that, again, as all these, a worthy goal, given our climate, relatively dry climate. A great deal of our California natives are drought tolerant, some extremely drought tolerant, but not all of them. Again, we have that diversity in the state, so there are some of our plants that do require more water. Maybe you just want to have a yard that's low or no maintenance. Well, most will require some level of maintenance, especially if you want them to look nice. But you maybe just want to like kind of restore the environment, and I think that's terrific. One thing you do need to be careful of, though, is if you live adjacent to a natural open space area, make sure what you're planting is from your local environment. Because there are some California natives that can easily spread and actually become invasive in other environments. So again, this is primarily a concern if you live near a natural open space area, very, very near. Maybe you want to support local wildlife, insects and birds and reptiles and everything. Well, that is great, and that's kind of my interest, especially for butterflies. When you're planting California natives that are larval hosts, you'll bring in all sorts of insects. Those in turn will bring in birds, reptiles, and you just get a whole ecosystem going in your yard. Maybe just want this connection with your native environs, or just sort of a show of California pride. And then down at the bottom here, it says, what about climate change? We'll get into that just a little bit, but when we talk about trees, primarily it's going to be a concern with trees. The full effects of climate change will take effect over decades. And so I guess we'll call it the functional useful life of a tree expands well into several decades. In the case of some trees, we're talking about centuries. So that is a concern. So let's talk about some things that you really need to know before you start planting. You need to know your local conditions in your yard, temperatures. What are your winter lows? Do you get hard frosts? Not all natives can handle that depending on where they're from. So you need to know that. The exposure, the degree of sun or shade that you get, different portions of your yard, whether they're you get that afternoon sun or morning sun. Drainage is perhaps one of the most important things here. Dig a few holes in your yard, fill them with water, see if they drain in a relatively reasonable fashion, because that will influence the type of plants that you're able to plant. Is your yard flat? Does it slope? This can certainly influence drainage. If you have some slope, even if you have maybe a little bit of a heavy soil, that slope will positively influence drainage and maybe open up your plant selection. Also, slope, depending on its orientation, that's related to your exposure. For example, if you have a south or southwest facing slope, your soil is going to heat up more. It gets more direct rays from the sun. It will dry out faster. And that's certainly something to be aware of. Your soil composition, definitely related to drainage. You need to know, do you have heavy clay soil? Do you have this nice, perfect loam that drains well, or maybe super sandy soil that drains so fast that only certain plants can thrive in it. Along with knowing your local conditions, you need to know the plant requirements. Again, not all the natives are created equal. They're from all sorts of different parts of the state. Consider the natural habitat that these plants are from, what their normal geographic range is, what their moisture requirements are, their preferred exposure. Do they like to have some shade, part shade, full shade? And then their preferred drainage. There's a few of the plants, we'll go over a couple of them that require almost perfect drainage. So you need to match your plant requirements to your local conditions. Okay, things to do before you plant. Make a plan. So let's talk about plant selections and locations. Consider the ultimate size of a plant. And for me, the do as I say, not as I do is particularly relevant here. You don't want, obviously, as these plants get into maturity, you don't want them blocking walkways, doorways, and as well as you want to be able to identify an individual plant. You planted a certain plant for a reason. So make sure that as it reaches its mature size, that there's some space around it. Both for health reasons for the plant, it's good to have some air circulation. And for maintenance, you don't want to be constantly pruning the plant because it's getting in the way of something. Now, if you're doing some mass planting, a big drift of buckwheat or something like that, that's different. But throughout all this, you need to consider the ultimate size of what you're planting. You need, as we discussed, you need to know the exposure requirement of the plant, how much sun it needs. Generally speaking, you want lower plants in the front and the foreground, larger plants in the background, but you also need to consider how the plants look in various seasons. How about mixing with non-native plants? Unless you're starting from scratch, you probably have some non-native plants. That's fine. I am not the native plant police. I don't have 100% California native plants. For maintenance, particularly irrigation purposes, it's certainly better if you have plants with similar watering requirements. And so non-natives that have similar watering requirements would include a lot of Mediterranean plants from the other Mediterranean regions on the planet. Okay, how about topo changes? You may be required to make some minor topographic changes in your yard. Maybe just due to drainage issues you might have, but also just changing from flat to some topography, I think adds to the aesthetic value. Mounds are great. Mounds are a great way to improve your drainage. You don't need 3-foot high mounds either. Sometimes just creating a planting area that's 6 inches or a foot above the native level will greatly improve drainage. Swales can provide just visual interest and also create areas that retain more moisture and maybe open up a different set of plants, different plant palette. Boulders, I love boulders. I just love how they look, but they have some practical benefits as well. They can moderate soil temperature. They can really complement how a plant looks. And they also, I've seen some literature where they may even have some positive interactions with the microbial community in the soil. Walkways and trails. Well, what good is having a yard full of plants if you actually can't get up close and take a look at them? So I like having, even if it's just a few stepping stones, just a gravel, decomposed granite trail or something, just something for some closer viewing. I think this is especially important if you really want to experience aromatic plants like sages or maybe something tactile that you can touch like Indian mallow. Irrigation, obviously you could spend hours just talking about irrigation. I'm not going to get into a lot of that here. There's many different options. I still have my drip irrigation system from before I started planting natives. Probably the worst type of irrigation you can have for natives. Micro sprayers are great, or rotary sprinklers; those work fine as well. And honestly, if you have the time and a small yard, hand watering, being able to tailor that watering may actually be the best way to go. Um, so again, I don't want to get into this too much, but you do want to group plants that have similar watering requirements as much as possible into individual hydrozones. Okay, planting and maintenance. There's so many different opinions about these topics. I think certainly out here in the Inland Empire, mid to late fall is by far the best time to plant. You want to plant as soon as possible in the cool season, so these new plants have enough time to get their roots, at least starting to get the roots established before the warm weather arrives. So very common to start out digging a hole at least twice the width of the root ball that it's in the container. Fill that with water and allow it to drain at least a couple of times just to soak that entire what the root zone is going to be. I do not use any kind of soil amendment in the hole for California natives. They generally like very lean, poor soils. And a lot of them absolutely do not respond well to a lot of organic material in the soil. This one's controversial as far as whether you loosen the root ball or not. I try and do that gently. For plants that are in the poppy family, they have such sensitive roots. Do not touch the roots at all. When you plant, make sure ultimately that the crown is slightly above the existing level of the soil, at least half an inch, maybe an inch. Tamp down that soil. There's almost always some settling that's going to occur, which is a reason why you want that crown to exist above the existing level when you plant it. Double check that. Whether you create a basin around it or not, there's some arguments pro and con there as well. Just make sure that that plant is sitting up above enough so it's not just sitting in water, in standing water. And water in the beginning, just keep on watering that plant, and mulch. Mulch helps with so many problems, keeping the soil cool, retaining that moisture. So maintenance, particularly during that first year, the irrigation is critical. It doesn't have to be constantly moist. In fact, you can run into problems like that, but that plant does have to get established. And that first summer is really the toughest thing to get through. I guarantee you will have plants die. It just happens, and it's usually during that first summer. Don't feel bad. It's just part of it. You get better and better as you do this. But hot soil temperatures in the summer and moisture is just a recipe for the growth of fungal pathogens. But you still have to water through that first summer and in future summers as well. But when you do water in the summer, water on the coolest days. Keep an eye on the forecast. If we have a few days coming that are who knows, maybe in the high 80s, pick those days for your watering. Water late at night or early in the morning when your soil is the coolest. This is the best way to avoid the bad fungus. Winter irrigation, if we have a great rainfall year, you may hardly ever have to irrigate at all. I like to, when we have these small storms that maybe only drop a quarter of an inch or so, I really like to leverage those small rain events with irrigation to get that deeper penetration in the soil. grooming your plants, just kind of mimic nature. There's little hungry critters that munch on plants out in nature. So, little tip pruning, deadheading, things like that, that is helpful, and it occurs naturally out in the wild as well. An occasional little squirt with the hose to squirt off dust on the foliage will perhaps help with mites, and it looks good too. Again, mulching to keep the weeds down and moderate those soil temperatures. Insects, for the most part, you don't really have to worry about. Ants, if you have a bad ant problem, that can definitely be a problem. And then borers can also do some serious damage as well. Okay, now let's see, I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to go on to the next portion of the presentation. If there's a couple of questions, I can take a few questions at this time, but this next section, we're going to talk about individual plants, a few trees, and then shrubs, perennials, vines, and some annuals and bulbs as well. And we can take more questions after that. Let's see here. Okay, and Lisa, you can let me know if there are any questions on that portion. There we go. Oops, let's see, that's not the beginning there. Oops. Ooh, okay. All right.
George,
Yes.
excuse me, please. We do have a question.
Okay.
Any specific kinds of mulch preferences?
Yeah, and actually it can depend on the plant too. If you have desert plants prefer inorganic mulch, just like gravel, rocks, things like that. Whereas some of the others, chaparral and coastal sage scrub plants, just bark, leaf material, just some natural organic material will work well. Nothing dense. You don't want to put grass clippings on there or anything like that, but just loose bark, leaves, things like that, and maybe to a couple of inches. And
thank you.
Sure.
Excuse me, George. And from Jane, we have a question with regards to pruning natives. Can you speak to that for a moment?
There isn't necessarily anything different about pruning natives than other plants. I wouldn't overdo it. I mean, if you're planting natives, at least this is my mindset. I do like them to look natural. I don't do a ton of pruning. Basically, when necessary, pruning out dead branches and things like that. And some of them, as we go through some of the individual plants, some of them do require more pruning than others to look good, and we'll get into that.
Thank you. And one more question from Pamela. Is hay okay for mulching?
Oh, hay?
Hay.
I think if it's, it probably would, but I'm kind of guessing here, but I think hay is loose enough, as long as it's not going to form a mat on the soil. I would think that hay would be okay. As long as it doesn't have any, seeds in it where, you don't want to become an alfalfa farmer.
Thank you, George.
All right, so let's get into some of these. Trees. Oh, I can't see my, well, that's all right. Trees, this is definitely the most important decision that you're going to make in your landscaping. It's also kind of almost like a personal decision, but it's definitely going to impact the remainder of your landscape in terms of the amount of shade the tree throws, what the roots are like, things like that. And it's a long-term decision. We're talking a little bit about climate change with shrubs that maybe have a functional, useful lifespan of anywhere from 5 years, maybe to 10, 15, some 20. Those can probably weather the changes that we're looking at, but the long-term impacts of climate change are going to take place over a few decades. And you're talking about trees that will have this useful lifespan of multiple decades into centuries. So you need to kind of get it right, get your selection right the first time. It's not easily replaced. Not that the plant is easy to replace. Sure, you can rip out a tree and replant something, but you've lost all that time, and it takes time for trees to develop into maturity. So some things to consider when you're planting or when you want to select a tree is, what is the purpose? Do you want something really showy, a flowering tree? Do you need something that grows really fast? You want to see some quick results, or are you more patient and willing to wait for something that really meets your needs? Roots, certainly you have to consider. Some trees do have rather aggressive roots, surface roots. You don't want them anywhere near a structure or your pipes. You prefer evergreen or deciduous? Do you want that shade year round, or maybe you like to have that sun shining through in the winter? And then maintenance is certainly a consideration. Some trees are messier than others. Maybe they drop a lot of seed pods or tons of leaves throughout the year. And there's nothing wrong with that, but are you willing to handle that type of maintenance load? All right, let's get into some of the individual species here. The oaks, and yeah, here we're talking about trees that can live centuries. Interesting. And oh, by the way, this was originally a longer presentation. I'm going to be going through these really fast and maybe skipping a few. But if you see something you'd like to talk about a little more, just make a little note or put it in the chat. And when we get to the end, we can talk about those a little more. So there's so many different oaks. I was going to actually count them beforehand, but we probably have, I don't know, 15 or 20 different oak species in California. So here's three of perhaps most interest. These do live 100 years, 200 years. But of most interest is the island oak, Quercus tomentella. It is one of the trees that's actually performed well in climate change vulnerability study. It's kind of interesting considering that it comes from an island habitat. So most of the oaks are slow growing. Takes decades and decades to really get that beautiful contorted classic oak look. Oaks have an unbelievably high habitat value. They host so many different insects, mammals, and birds. All right, desert willow. This has really become one of my favorite. It's a small tree or large shrub. It's naturally multi-trunked. I have seen them pruned up as a single trunk tree, just takes more maintenance. These are native to our local desert washes. They're very easy to grow. The flowers are absolutely beautiful, usually in some shade of pink, all the way into burgundy. Again, they're from desert washes, so they do like to have naturally that nice deep watering to simulate thunderstorms in the summer. They are easy to grow. I think I mentioned that. And hummingbirds love these trees. Here's another one from desert washes, Palo Verdes. There's two native species, blue Palo Verde and little leaf Palo Verde. However, my recommendation would be Desert Museum Palo Verde, which isn't a natural native plant because it's a three-way hybrid between two natives and I believe the Mexican Palo Verde. And through some genetic quirk, though all three parents have spines, somehow the Desert Museum Palo Verde has no thorns, which is a big plus in my book. Lots of yellow flowers in spring. does attract a lot of bees, other pollinators, and it provides a really nice filtered shade. It's perfect for growing cactus under and other desert plants if you like that landscape. Okay, I'm not going to really talk about this, although I love the California buckeye. It has been found to be a host to invasive shot hole borer. Other than that, I do like them, but pass. Likewise, sycamores are also a shot hole borer host, unfortunately. Uh, in addition to that, they can become huge trees. They're probably not suitable for most residential landscapes, so we can leave them to institutional uses. But yeah, you would need a large yard to host one of these. So I didn't talk a whole lot about trees. That's again, it's kind of a personal decision. Easy enough to do the research on various trees. There's so many other oaks, pines, Catalina fernleaf ironwood is a really interesting looking tree, but there's tons of them out there. But let's get into shrubs. This is really something that's going to constitute the majority of the plantings in your yard. It's kind of going to be the foundation of your yard. Again, consider the ultimate size of these plants as you go through. Otherwise, you're creating more work for yourself in the long run. Shrubs come in a wide variety of height, both leaf texture and general texture of the plant, leaf color, seasonality. I may have made up that word, I'm not sure, but I view that as just what is the general appearance of the plant throughout the seasons. Some plants have just a really high season. Maybe they're in flower in the spring or some other time of year. Others may look the same year round, but ideally you want plants that kind of peak at different times of the year. So there's some interest in your yard year round. And that it's also sort of related to this next thing, which I think I may have made up as well, hard and soft leaf shrubs. And we'll get into that a little, but what I consider hard leaf shrub is something where those leaves remain on the plant throughout the growing season. They're pretty sturdy leaves as opposed to what we'll call soft leaf shrubs, where those leaves will either shrivel up or even fall off during the growing season. And some of them, the plants can look kind of tired in the middle of summer. And that's just part of it. That's part of the California natives. It's just part of the seasonal change that we experience. All right, definitely one of the hardleaf shrubs here, toyon. It can be an extremely large shrub, a good foundation plant. Really a beautiful plant, nice green leaves, very sturdy, semi-glossy. Gets somewhat nondescript cream-colored flowers in the summer, but then the berries that it gets turn bright red in late fall or early winter, typically before Christmas. That's one of the names is California holly. They can be very slow to start, maybe a couple years before it really starts putting on any significant amount of growth, but then it will grow at a fairly good pace. Out here in our area, I think it does best with some afternoon shade, and it's a relatively easy one to grow. It can take more summer water than some of the other chaparral plants. Here's a beautiful one, Western redbud. This is a deciduous plant. It can be a tree or a large shrub. This has interest in all four seasons for me, at least in late winter, early spring. It gets these beautiful magenta flowers before it leaves out. The new leaves are kind of a nice bright apple green, and then they age to almost a bluish green throughout the rest of the season. You can see in that little inset picture also those little sickle shapes that are missing from the leaves. Leaf cutter bees seem to just love Western redbud. And they cut those little sections out of the leaf and use it to line their nests. The leaves are a unique shape, that kind of a rounded heart shape. After the leaves fall, even the bare tree, well, there's pods as well that add some interest, but even after everything falls and you just have the bare branches, the twigs have kind of a zigzag shape to them, which I think makes them look easy, or makes them look interesting. These are easy to grow, very adaptable, and I think an underutilized landscape plant. Hollyleaf cherry. This is one that grows locally. It's a pretty plant, evergreen shrub, glossy to semi-glossy leaves. It also gets cream-colored flowers in the spring, and that's followed up by these nice big bright red cherries. But don't get your cherry pie recipes out, because these things have about a 1/16 to an 18 or a 1/16 to an eighth of an inch of flesh, and then it's just this massive pit. Technically, they're edible, but they're pretty bitter. The birds will eat them though. And there is a more tree-like subspecies, the Catalina cherry. This one I won't talk about a lot, but it's almost a special purpose tree, mountain mahogany. It has a very narrow growth habit, so it'd be good for a parkway or something like that. But I really like when it sets seed, the seeds have these little tails on them, with the little hairs, and they're backlit. When they're backlit by the sun, it makes the whole plant look like it's almost silver. Ceanothus. The next two I'm going to be talking about, Ceanothus and Manzanita, are similar in that there's so many different species throughout the state. They range from ground cover to tree-like for both the Ceanothus and the Manzanita. Additionally, they can both be difficult to grow. Most of the varieties require excellent drainage, but they're both just beautiful plants. The Ceanothus, most of them have flowers that in some shade of blue, anywhere from a light blue to almost an electric blue. They'll bloom generally late winter to early spring, but both the Ceanothus and the Manzanita are extremely sensitive to summer water. It can kill them. So when you do water them in summer, very important you do it on the coolest days, and water at night or early in the mornings. There's some varieties listed there. Yankee Point is like a tallish ground cover, maybe 3 feet or so, which is one that is probably one of the easier ones to grow, and is I've seen it used in commercial landscapes. Manzanita, perhaps my favorite California native. They're just beautiful. They have that peeling red bark. Again, they require excellent drainage. They have beautiful branching structure, and the flowers are these little hanging lanterns that can be anywhere from white to a deep pink. Love them. Hummingbirds, I like watching the hummingbirds come up and just access the nectar from the little hole in the bottom. There's some more pictures of Manzanita and some more varieties. Howard McMinn is a popular one that's fairly easy to grow. And there's some more. So I believe that is a Howard McMinn on the left with the peeling bark there. It always reminds me of chocolate shavings. All right. Sugarbush and lemonberry, both species within the rose genus. These are very large shrubs. You can find both of them locally, although the sugarbush, which is the one on the right and also the lower picture, is more predominant in our area. Lemonade berry you'll find more toward the coast. These are tough plants. They're pretty easy to grow, very adaptable. And I think they're underutilized in our landscape. The sugarbush has the glossier leaves that are folded at the midrib. The leaves of the lemonade berry almost look oak-like to me. Oregon grape and Nevin barberry are two members of the Berberis genus. Oregon grape is pretty popular, and it's one of those anomalies for me because it grows in a climate so different from ours, up in the very northern part of the state and into Oregon, but it seems to do well in our area. Certainly better in the shade, but I have some that are growing in full sun since I removed a tree. They are no longer in the shade. I expected them to die, and they're still there. The one on the lower right there is Nevin's barberry, which is something that is, or at least was, native to portions of Riverside County. They both have spiny leaves, but that Nevin's barberry, the leaves are extremely rigid, good barrier plant, and it after the yellow flowers, it sets these berries that are ripened to a translucent red and are real pretty in the sun. Okay, we're transitioning to the what we'll call the soft leaf shrubs now. Sages, there's many different sages to plant. They're all very aromatic. They're fairly easy to grow. You can find them in many, many nurseries, even some of the big box stores. They almost all attract hummingbirds and many other pollinators. This is one of the plants that does, to look good, to look presentable, it does require fairly heavy pruning at the end of the growing season, like late fall into winter. You can prune these things back by at least a third, and then the new growth will surge from there and flowers the following spring. They start out with these larger, more lush looking leaves, but as weather warms up, those tend to kind of wither and drop, and they're replaced by these little smaller grayish leaves in the axils. A few sages to look at, Cleveland sage on the left there, and purple sage on the right. Both beautiful plants. Cleveland sage is more of an inland one, native to portions of Riverside County. White sage on the left, much larger leaves that looks different than a lot of the other sages. And those white leaves can provide a contrast to some of the darker, richer, greener plants in your landscape. That's Brandegee sage on the right, tends to have bluer rather than purple blossoms. Hummingbird sage on the left there, with those big, huge whorls of flowers. The spikes can get up to 2 feet easily. This is, I think, one of my favorite sages. It's very resinous. All parts of the plant are scented, almost like a fruity and minty scent to it. And the leaves can actually be used in tea or cocktails. This is one, though, that really does start looking pretty tired by the end of summer, but those flowers are worth it. Bee's Bliss is down on the bottom there. This is a ground cover sage, spreads fairly wide, probably to 6 feet or so. One thing I do like about it is this one doesn't really require any pruning. Somehow those flower stalks, they just kind of disappear on their own. Pitcher sage, I won't talk about this one as much, other than to say I love the scent. It's a very strong scent. It's a little odd. I think there's some people that don't like it, but I love the fragrance of this one. Buckwheats. Got two that are shown here. The one on the left there is St. Catherine's lace, which is a massive plant for a shrub. It has kind of large, probably 2-inch long oval leaves, kind of a light grayish green, but it gets these huge flowering heads, inflorescence, a foot or more across. All the buckwheats, their flowers will age to eventually a rust color. You can cut the flowers at any stage and use them as dried flowers, and they'll stay the color they were when you cut them. The other two pictures are of California buckwheat. All these buckwheats are really important habitat plants. Those flowers provide tons of nectar for insects. The seeds provide food for insects and birds, and they are larval host plants for many, many butterflies and moths. Oh, we go from the subtle flowers of the buckwheat to woolly blue curls. These are maybe the most interesting flowers. They're beautiful. Both the flowers and the foliage is scented, kind of very resinous. This one is notoriously difficult to grow. I have been successful growing these in just mounds of straight decomposed granite. That seems to provide the excellent drainage that they need. They definitely don't like a lot of summer water, but this plant is definitely worth giving a try if you're feeling confident. And here, the classic soft leaf shrubs here. These things can look pretty tired by the end of summer. But they can have a long bloom season. Both the brittle bush, which is the grayer one, native to our areas, covers all our hillsides around here, and the coast sunflower, which is more of a coastal plant, but it will grow out here. You can give it some water in the summer and extend that blooming period and hopefully keep some of that foliage. But eventually, toward the end of the year, they'll start looking a little ragged. Monkey flower. This is a subshrub that it doesn't really get woody, but it's a beautiful little plant, anywhere from maybe a foot to 2 or 3 feet high. Comes in a wide, there's so many cultivars that have been developed, it comes in a wide variety of colors. They don't necessarily live very long, maybe 5 years for the most part, if they're happy. This is a larval host for checker spot and buckeye butterflies. Good hummingbird plant as well. And here's another excellent hummingbird plant, island snapdragon, another island plant that seems to do very well in our area. It does require some shade in our area, but there's usually some blossoms on it year round, and you'll find both butterflies and hummingbirds on that. This one also benefits from some significant pruning in the winter. The mallows, got a couple of mallows here, chaparral mallow on the left, San Clemente Island mallow on the right, which gets very different looking flowers. They're white with a little pinkish tinge to them. And the chaparral mallow is much taller. That can get up to 10 feet easily. Both of them will spread underground. If you don't want them somewhere, as they come up, they're pretty easy to pull out. California wild rose. This one's on the bad list now, I'm afraid to say. Beautiful plant, but it spreads underground so quickly. I was surprised at how quickly it spread, and of course they have really nasty thorns, so they're hard to remove. Maybe a good container plant. Fairy duster, both the this fairy duster and the Baja fairy duster, which is commonly found in nurseries with the bright red flowers. And that Baja fairy duster is showing up on native plant lists now, I'm happy to say. It's a lot easier to find and a little easier to grow. That is the Baja fairy duster, the bright red one. But these are really nice plants that make these little puff balls, and they bloom. Particularly the Baja fairy duster blooms just about year round. This one, the pink one, mostly in spring is its primary bloom season, but this will attract butterflies and hummingbirds. This is a desert plant, not real showy, but interesting. It gets these little rose-like flowers, and then the flowers are followed by these clusters of seeds that have this feathery tail to them. This one, it rebloomed and again after that tropical storm we had. The currants, I've actually had mixed, these are supposed to be fairly easy to grow. I've had mixed results with them, but I would encourage you to try them. They're beautiful plants. I've had the best luck with the golden currant, which ends up getting these beautiful berries that age from yellow to a translucent deep red. One not shown here is Catalina perfume, which is kind of a tall ground cover. And you rub the leaves on the Catalina perfume, a very nice, sweet, spicy scent. And bladder pod, I guess I saved the easiest one for last on the shrubs here. This one is just an easy plant to grow. It grows very fast. And it's so adaptable because its natural range is anywhere from the desert to within view of the ocean. The only downside of this one is the leaves do have kind of a funky odor to them. Other than that, the plant blooms just about year round. If you want to plant more of them, it reseeds very freely, or you can take the seeds out of those big pods and plant them anywhere you want. They germinate pretty easily. But bees are all over this thing, and hummingbirds. Oop. Oh, I'll do the. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the, oh, I need to go through really fast on the rest of these here. Where is, there we go. All right, some of the perennials and vines and annuals very quickly. These are going to be primarily used as accents, maybe a special purpose like vines, or temporary filler, short-term things like the annuals. Generally speaking, higher maintenance plants requiring more pruning. Certainly with the annuals, you got to get rid of the dead stuff after it goes to seed. But let's go through them quickly. Penstemon, I am only showing one here, the royal penstemon. They all have similar flowers. These can get very tall. I love with those big flowers, I love watching our native bees, like the carpenter bees and bumblebees, just go completely just hide themselves within these flowers. Another one that is not shown here is the Margarita Bop foothill penstemon. It's a much smaller plant, maybe getting a foot to 2 feet high, with much finer leaves, but that's a good, easier to grow one. Lilac verbena. This one's really easy to grow. It's native to Cedros Island, probably one of the best butterfly and hummingbird nectar plants. And when this thing is in full bloom, it just looks like a little tour ball of purple. Nice fragrance as well. Matilla hapapis, how can you not like those? These huge flowers, the petals look like crinkly crepe paper. The leaves are kind of unremarkable, but those flowers are amazing. It's difficult to start, but if once you do get it established, it can spread to other areas, and I just let them spread wherever they want to go. This is something that you want to cut to stubs in the winter. On to milkweed. You're probably mostly familiar with milkweed, the larval host for both monarchs and queen butterflies. These are actually queen butterfly caterpillars. And they do tend to attract the tarantula hawk wasps as well. Palmer's Indian mallow, I mentioned that earlier, as a tactile plant. This is native to desert edges and mountain slopes near the deserts. The leaves are just covered with these soft hairs. Very interesting plant, and also a larval host plant for a few butterflies. Apricot mallow, likewise a desert plant. Although it does grow native out here in some of the hill areas. It's a super adaptable plant, easy to grow, beautiful flowers with a wide range of colors and a long bloom season. Does require heavy pruning in the off season. late fall to winter. California fuchsia, also called hummingbird flower, another hummingbird and butterfly attractor. This one is very different and important because it has a much later blooming season. It blooms in summer into fall. So for native plants, it provides an important source of nectar when most other plants aren't blooming. Okay, this one, go ahead and skip this. This just grows wild in our area. I've never planted it, but I just let it grow when it pops up. The mirabilis, 4 o'clock or wishbone bush. Coast aster, I'm on the line on this one. Beautiful flowers, great pollinator plant, but it can spread and get under control, get out of control fairly easily. Vines, California wild grape, can get beautiful fall color and will produce small, deep purple grapes loved by birds, and technically edible, but they have thick skins and a lot of seeds. This one has also been crossed off my list. As pretty as it is super vigorous and drops tons of seedlings. I had actually removed this from my yard and I'm still pulling out seedlings. This one is just, just interesting because of the flowers. This is a Northern California species, California Dutchman pipe. Also the larval host of pipe vine swallowtails. This hasn't decided. The honeysuckle hasn't decided whether it wants to be a vine or a shrub, but this is a good hummingbird plant as well. Those tubular flowers, and the birds can eat the fruit. Annuals, very quickly. Annuals, nothing tells you it's spring like when the wildflowers start blooming. Temporary fillers. When you throw out some wildflower seed and it starts blooming, you will draw just so many pollinators. You will just see things flying around that you probably have never seen before. You want to plant the wildflower seed pretty soon, just before we start getting the fall rains. Just a few of them to show you the array: desert bluebells, which is a type of Phacelia, as well as the California bells, both Phacelia, goldfields in the middle. Another tansy leaf Phacelia, which is a very tall plant on the left there. We've got a couple of different kinds of Gilia here. What I do like about the Gilia is that they have turquoise pollen, which is, I think it's really cool. I don't know if that means my time is up, but go through these real quick. Tidy tips and lupin, some more poppies there. Clarkia is in a lot of native plant mixes. It is a tall growing one and can kind of hide some of the other plants. Though sunflower, kind of a coarse looking plant, not refined, but a good one for both birds and pollinators. Some bulbs there, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this up because I'm at the end of my time. Douglas iris is an easy bulb or rhizome to grow. It's a native iris. And then here's some resources for everyone to check up on their own. Calscape.org, I will mention, that's a great website. Just everything you want to know about these natives, where they grow, where their native range is, and also host on what butterfly larvae that they host. I'll also mention the California Native Plant Society sale is coming up, I believe November 4th. So that's in a couple of weeks if you're looking for some native plants. Fortunately, native plants are becoming more and more available at some of the nurseries. But with that, let's go ahead, and if there's any questions, I'll leave this resource slide up.
Thank you, George. We do have a few questions in chat, and then if you'll raise your hands, George can answer your questions that pop into your mind. Let's start with Pamela's. She says, in Tulare and Visalia, it was illegal to trim or cut back an oak tree without a permit from the county or city. Are they endangered?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I know there are some places that have some local ordinances. I mean, sometimes pruning is necessary. But I'm not sure if I understood the question. If they're in danger, I mean, there are threats to oaks, just from sudden oak disease. There's what is it? Golden spotted oak borer, as well as climate change in the long run.
Pamela may be referring to the oak tree as a whole across our tree community. Are the oak trees an endangered species? And Pamela, if I'm getting this wrong, please speak up.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with whether any of them are actually endangered species, but there are certainly threats to oaks.
Yes. Thank you. Well, we do have a few more questions. George, do you have a moment?
Sure.
Wonderful. Director Roten indicates that you have mentioned many plants with the name of Catalina in them. I highly recommend a visit to the Catalina Island Botanical Gardens and Ridley Memorial. It's a beautiful and somewhat hidden asset of the Catalina Island.
Well, thank you. No, I have never, I've only been to Catalina once in my life. And next time I do that again, I'll definitely put those on my list. I love visiting different botanic gardens.
Yes, and we have many in Southern California, as well as Catalina. I think that's a great recommendation. And we have a question from Susan Wright. What about laurel sumac?
Yeah, laurel sumac is actually used to be considered in the rose genus, related to sugarbush and lemonade berry. But yeah, laurel sumac, I like laurel sumac. It has an interesting fragrance as well. It is not super frost tolerant. That would be the only warning I would have. But it is in the sumac family, like the sugarbush and lemonade berry. I think it's a beautiful plant, very large shrub.
Thank you. Oh, I love this. This isn't a question, but Julie shares with us, great job, George. Thanks for sharing from your wealth of knowledge and experience. And I believe we all feel this sentiment.
Well, thank you.
Are there any other questions from our audience? So we're all ready to garden natives this morning.
Great.
Yes,
Fall,
I'm inspired.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, George.
Did you need to say anything? No? Okay.